Before we get started,
So raise your hand if you like Java. OK, that's about 90% of the room. Raise your hand if you like JavaScript. OK, more like 75%. So raise your hand if you've been programming for about 20 years now. OK, that's about 15%. Raise your hand if you've been doing it for 10 years. OK, so we got some more hands. What about just 1 or 2 years? So we got like 5 people. OK, so who likes Angular? OK, 30%? I'm just guessing here. Who likes React? Probably 10 of you. Who likes Ember?
we got 1, 2.
OK, raise your hand if you like DevOps. Nice. What if you like DevOps for kids? Come on, we need more hands than that. So here's another question. Who uses Dojo?
We got 1.
I was expecting less. Now please welcome my dad, Matt Raible.
So today we're going to be talking about the art of Angular in 2016, and I found this delicious beer down the street, and it's happy hour, 5 o'clock, so cheers. So I used this slide up here for this presentation because I drove this VW bus last week, and it's beautiful, as is art, and France, and Paris. It's great to be here. So you probably know this story. My name is Matt Raible. I'm a hick from the sticks. I grew up in the backwoods of Montana with no electricity and no running water. And I had to walk 2 miles to the bus stop every day, and yes, it was uphill both ways. I have a strange obsession with Volkswagen vans. This one last month actually got the throttle stuck while I was driving skiing. And it's interesting to drive a car with the throttle stuck. This one, when we picked it up 2 weeks ago, it started spewing oil everywhere, and we had to get it AAA'd back to the shop. But hey, this is the first stop on the 2016 bus tour. I'm happy to say that it's finally finished after 10 years, and happy to be here. So to become an artist, WikiHow has 3 different steps. The first step is learn the basics on your own. Take some time and try various mediums of art, recognize your strengths, do your research, learn the basics. So that's what we're here to do today, is to basically learn how to be artistic with Angular. Part 2 and 3 is learn from others and promote your work. So you're doing part 3 as well. So when we look at jobs on dice.com, April 2016, you'll notice here that Angular really has a lot more than the other sites. And, you know, true that dice.com maybe not be the best job site anymore, but that's what I've been using for the past 5 years to track frameworks and, you know, jobs around them. And just the growth is crazy with Angular. It's, you know, it doubles like every 6 months how many jobs are out there with it. If you look at the job growth there, you can see with Ember has actually taken off quite a bit recently too. But Angular's really, you know, come up a lot. And the others, you know, Knockout and React and Backbone, not so much. With LinkedIn, Angular has the most skills. So if you search LinkedIn to see who has what skills, and I do this on a worldwide search, it shows that most people are learning Angular and not so much with the other ones. But if you take out Angular, then there's a lot of people that know Backbone. So those are just some interesting trends. Skills growth, Angular, people are learning it. That's why you're here, right? Google Trends, if you look at Angular with Ember and Knockout and Backbone, you'll notice that Angular is just getting a lot of people searching for help, or maybe searching for Angular. Not sure, but they're searching. And then it's interesting to see Angular 2, if you add that in. See that little blip, the little green? It's actually already ahead of React and Ember, even though it hasn't truly been released yet. You'll notice I also added Oracle Jet This doesn't even show up. Anyone heard of that? Come on, it was announced at Java 1 last year. Oh well. What about Angular 2? You'll notice if we take Angular out, holy cow, like it's really getting a lot of traction. Does that mean it's good? No, it's hot. If you're a consultant like me, it's a good time to learn it right about now, because my guess is it'll probably be released right before Google I/O, which is the end of May. You know, there's a lot of motivations for them to do that. So who wants to learn Angular? How many people know Angular already? How many people know Angular 2? Okay, we got 4 or 5 of you, so if I have some, hiccups here, then you'll help me out, right? So with AngularJS, Hello World is pretty easy. You just have an HTML5 doc type, you have an input field, you have an ng model, you import the Angular JavaScript file, and it's pretty easy to do. You can do it all in, 10, 15 lines of code. But if we're going to talk about the art of Angular in 2016, I think we have to talk about Angular 2. And notice what it says on Angular.io, one framework. Is it one framework to rule them all? You got to wonder if they're trying to do that, right? Mobile and desktop. So there's a certain focus from Google, and I think React has probably caused them to go this way, and saying that, hey, you can do this type of programming on the desktop, on mobile, and desktop, not just desktop browser, but as an application on the desktop. So with Angular 2, it gets a little more complicated for Hello World. This is the index.html, and you'll notice the number 1 there, loading the libraries. It's got a bunch of polyfills for IE, good old IE. But not all of them. That Angular 2 polyfills is for other browsers as well, and then System.js and Rx and Angular 2. Those are all needed by everyone. And then the second part is configuring System.js, where you register the default extension and then import the main class that you're going to run. And then at the bottom, you'll see it's displaying the application. And so if we look at that main in that app, main.ts, this is TypeScript. It actually has a bootstrap that it imports in an app component. So if you're used to doing things in Java, which most of you are, this syntax kind of looks familiar, except some weird curly braces that you have to have around your classes. But the imports are there. And then as an actual component, you'll see here we're importing that component, and then it looks like annotations. And then you have a selector, which is what tag you're going to bind that to, and then a template. And you export the class. So one of the things that, in Java we can do public, right? In JavaScript or ES6 now you do export. And so when you get into Angular 2, there's a few choices you have to make. Unfortunately, it's not just as easy as copying and pasting everything like you can with Angular 1. So you're forced to choose a language and make development environment decisions before you create your project. So you can use ES6 or even ES5. You can use TypeScript. Basically, anything that compiles into JavaScript you can use. You can install Node if you want to set up your development environment. Usually, you kind of have to do this nowadays with JavaScript MVC programming. A package manager like NPM or JSPM, or even Bower. But Bower is kind of frowned upon because what Bower does is it pulls in JavaScript files for your whole application. And one of the things that ES6 focuses on, and Angular 2, is just pulling in what you need for that component. It's got a module loader. It might be System.js or Require.js, a transpiler, Raible or tracer, and a build tool like Grunt or Gulp or Broccoli. And if you look at ES6 versus TypeScript, you might be like, hey, we can use ES6 and we don't have to worry about it. Well, good old IE11 makes you have to use a transpiler. So thanks, IE, again. But Raible is out there and it's used by a lot of companies. So either Tracer or Raible. Chances are, if you're actually using TypeScript, you'll probably want to use Tracer. That's from Google, and they've done, put a lot of work into that. And these are just some, emerging stacks. If you're using ES6, you might use JSPM and System.js and Raible and Gulp. So it just depends on what stack you want to go with. The easiest way, I think, to get started is with Minko Getch. Boy, he's got a tough Russian last name. But you basically can download the quick start. And for ES6 users, there is another repo that you can use. And here's the one that I usually use, is Angular 2 seed. And then there's an advanced one. So the advanced one has like ng2 translate in there if you need translation, AngularJS 2 Lodash, and even native script support, so you can write native iOS applications, and Electron. So Electron is what Atom is built off of. Atom's the editor that we use from GitHub, and you can create desktop applications with Angular 2. So that's all pretty neat. So let's look under the hood of Angular 2. I'm going to start with Angular 2 seed, and I'm going to build a search feature that gets its data via HTTP. It has unit tests and integration tests. I got a little script here. Makes it a little easier. So I got to mirror my screens first of all. So quiet. Does anyone else have a beer? Josh? Cheers. So I did a few things beforehand because I have had problems with NPM during demos. You'll notice here, it's just a quick start, right? It's so easy. So I started by cloning into an Angular DevOps France directory, CD'd into it. The cloning took 26 seconds. That was my first sign of a warning, because back at my hotel it took 5. And when it took 26, I was like, maybe I should do this beforehand. And then I ran npm install -g ts node, so that's for TypeScript's node support, so it does the compilation. And then npm I, same thing as npm install, and then npm start. The cool thing is all that worked, it just spit out a lot of logging. And it took 3 minutes and 22 seconds. So now I can just do npm start. So you can see here, howdy, there's a list of awesome computer sciences. So this is what you get by default. If you click on About, you'll see there's Gulp working with TypeScript out of the box, production and development build, so it'll do that concatenation and minification if you need it. It's got some sample unit tests in there, end-to-end tests with Protractor, some live reload with browser sync, and TypeScript, all that. And even a basic service worker if you want to use that, where it caches everything locally and then makes network requests to make sure the network's there. So we can add, some local heroes. All right? But it doesn't save anything. If you refresh, then it's gone. So it doesn't have a backend or anything. But what I can do here is now I can open it in IntelliJ. There we go. It's in presentation mode. So I'm going to start by creating a search component. You'll notice they just started doing this in the last couple of weeks. I don't know why, and I didn't bother to ask, but they put a plus in front of stuff, so we'll just go ahead and keep that mantra. We'll go plus search components. And here we'll create an HTML file. So search component.html. We'll add those all to Git so we can see it at the end. We got editor config there. And then we just start with ng2 search. No, my luck, it's indexing everything still. Oh, there we go. So this is a basic HTML form. You'll see the syntax looks a little different than Angular 1. It's got this ng model. This is the way you do the two-way binding with Angular 2. You put brackets and you put these guys around it. And then these are the way you call events. Key up enter calls that, as well as when you click on the button. And then we're just going to display our search results down here. So now if we create a TypeScript file, search component.ts, and then this is the biggest thing I learned not to do, is IntelliJ is not quite there yet. So you say no, or else you would see all these errors, like at the bottom while IntelliJ is compiling stuff, and it works, but IntelliJ is telling you it's not going to work. But it does. So in our component, we got some imports. We got our component selector. We're just giving it SD search there. We have our template URL and some directives for forms and routing. And we have our constructor. So you'll notice this guy looks similar to Java. I mean, instead of public class, it says export class. And then we've got a couple local variables. And they're typed. You don't have to type them. You can put any, or you could even put nothing. and it's still OK. So TypeScript is mostly just types on top of ES6. You delete the types, you have ES6. So then we have to go into app component. This is the main entry point. And we have to say, hey, we have a new search component. And we're going to call it from there. And we have to go into here and say, OK, I'm a good developer. I like to copy and paste. Now it pulls that in. Go back to our app. It's pulling that in. And now we can add a new route here. So we have search, search, and search. So at this point, we should be able to go back to our browser and actually type in search, and it pulls up that search box. So that's how to get a new page into an Angular 2 application. You'll notice it looks kind of funny. So one of the things you can do is you can go in and add a CSS file. And it points to that. And you're like, sweet, that was easy. That's going to work great, right? Nope. It's going to lock up my browser. That's what it's going to do. Failed to find, obviously, that CSS file. We have to create it. Search component. You'll get tired of typing component and everything sooner or later. So you can use this :host to say, for this element, give it this information. So you'll notice now I got some padding there, and it scooches over a little bit. And lastly, in the nav bar, we'll go ahead and add a link to that. So you'll see this is a little different from UI router and UI sref that you might use with Angular 1. Pointing to that router link that we defined in that app. I go back to our browser, and now it's there. We can click on it and navigate around. So now we want to create a backend for that, so we can actually load up some data. Under shared, we're going to create a data directory. And this is a fun demo to do in the US. It doesn't quite make as much sense here. But in Denver, Colorado, we have an American football team that won it all this year, and we're pretty happy about that. So I have a few players, Peyton Manning, Demaryius Thomas, Von Miller, that I use for my sample data. And then we can create a service. This will be search.service. You'll see here this is a search. Oh, that's the wrong one. Sorry. Service. This actually has two classes embedded in it. So just like you have in Java, where you can have classes in the same file, this has an address, a person, and I got this constructor object from the NG2 book that shows you that this allows you to instantiate an object and pass in like a JSON object, a key value pair, and set certain variables instead of having a parameter list that has all those different variables needed. And then you'll see we just grab that people.json file from here, and we map it to the response, and we map it to JSON. So now to use that, we have to go back into our search component, and we have to import it. So we're importing two things, person and search service. We're not directly referencing that address, so we don't have to. And right here, we can do array person. Right? So now we have those types that we can use. And we can also do a typed constructor, where we pass in that search service as a service. And we don't have to set it as a private variable when you're using TypeScript. If you're using ES6, you would, but this is one of the features of TypeScript. If you put that public on it when you pass it in as a constructor, it will set it as a local variable, and you can use it. And then we could have a method that calls that search service and subscribes. So this is part of RxJS and its observables feature, where it subscribes to a result. And then if there's an error, we'll obviously log that out. So now, we have to first export that service to use it. And then you go back and you're like, OK, that should work, right? No provider for search service. So this is something that you have to do a little bit different. You have to go into your main one. You kind of have to do this in Angular 1. We go here and we add it as a view provider. So you go back here and you're like, OK, that should work. No provider for HTTP. You're like, what the heck? And you go back here and you're like, OK, well, maybe that's in main.ts. And you're like, oh, yeah, I remember. ng import HTTP. These are all live templates that I pre-recorded. My idea is not really this smart, but it does make these demos easier. And then you import HTTP providers. You'll notice that IntelliJ is actually code completing this for me, so that makes it a little easier. And you're like, OK, now it's going to work. Cool. Then you click on it, and you're like, what the heck? Map is not a function. I was stuck on this error for maybe an hour or two the first time I got it. And it's pretty easy to solve as well once you know what it means. So hopefully you guys will get your money's worth just based on that. Import map. So this is from RxJS, this operator called a map. Then you go back, and now you can actually search, and you get results, right? It's pulling back those results. So if you want to make those look good, you go to the HTML file, search component, and you change this to a table. And now we got that. Looks a little better, but still not quite good. So you go, OK, well, I know CSS, so I'll make that better that way. Give it some padding and some borders. Now it's looking a little better. My CSS didn't work. Oh, well. We can move on from there. But one of the problems is, if you look, we're still not searching, right? I mean, this whole thing is a search thing, and it's not searching. So we need to go into here and add an actual search method, right? That takes a string and actually does a lowercase, compares it to your JSON, and then filters it, maps it, returns it. And then you go into search component, and you say, OK, well, let's change this a bit. So it calls that search method, and it passes in the query that's set by that form. And once you do that, you can say OK, and it'll search and filter those results. So that's all good and great, but you want to actually verify that things are working. So tests, right? And one of the problems with JavaScript and with browser sync and all that is it makes you not want to write tests because you can see the results immediately, right? If you're doing it in your IDE in one screen and you have the other screen on your other browser, then you're like, I proved it works, but then 2 months down the road you can break it. So it's a good idea to always write unit tests and integration tests. So to do that, for our search component, first of all, I'm going to create a couple mocks so we can put spies on those mocks. We're going to call this in a mocks directory, search service.ts. And you'll see here this uses Jasmine's spy feature and basically has mock search service, extends that spy object. And then we'll also do one for routes. So this one's a lot longer, obviously, but it's mocking the route parameters, it's mocking the router, and the router provider. So any test you would basically use these for. And I wouldn't be surprised if these actually end up in Angular core at some point, just because they do make things a lot easier when you're mocking. Oh, wait, that guy's not working. Looks like, oh, I'm supposed to do this. Refactor. Now it's working. So now if I go ahead and say, OK, let's create the spec. Search component spec.ts. this is what the basics look like for setting up testing for a search component, just to do those mock search providers and to basically get those providers and set them all here. And then the actual tests themselves. We have 2 of them. This is Angular 2, and it's not going to be easy to remember, so you might have to have shortcuts like this. But already this inject async has been renamed to inject. So this is one reason why you might not want to start with it right now. But there is a great Twitter feed that I'll point to later that shows you how to stay up to date and when things are deprecated and stuff. So it creates this async component, and then it sets up a fixture. And then basically, you get access to this component instance, and you can just set query and call search, and then make sure that search method was called. Same thing here, and what we're doing here is we're saying, hey, we're setting up a route parameter, and when it's on the URL, you should automatically search if that's on there. So this does basically similar to scope apply in Angular 1, where it execute those changes, and then it makes sure that the service gets called correctly. And so now we can open up our terminal and say npm test. And it all just works, right? Oh, no. It was never called. That's because in the search component, we never actually coded up that constructor that automatically searched when you got there. So the way to do that is ng2 auto search. So this takes that search service, takes a route param. IntelliJ is like, hey, you haven't imported that. So you can import it up here. And then you can get whatever's on that router. Basically, question mark term equals. It decodes it, and then it calls search with it. So now we can run the test again. Now this time, everything passes. So we have a unit test for our search component. And the last thing I want to do is a protractor test. So npm run WebDriver -update. You only have to run this once. Of course, if you've if you just checked out the project, you'll have to run it again since it downloads it into your node modules directory. And then there's a number of other commands you have to do. npm run WebDriver start. Oh, it's not down yet. There we go. And then you need to start up npm run serve end-to-end, so it starts on a different port. And then the actual npm test. So we'll go ahead and create. Okay, it's just started up. A search component e2e.ts. And you'll see here, this basically grabs that form input, makes sure it's present, and then it allows searching. Well, if you search by M, it's in everyone's name. So let's do Vaughn, so we know we're only getting 1. And then we'll expect that to be 3. And then the last thing you do to run those is npm run e2e. So these are commands that are all built into that, quick start. Who thinks it's going to work? Good. You guys are smart. Some of you are sleeping, I know. It's tough sitting through a demo. Guy threw a bunch of TypeScript out there. So yeah, it failed on one thing. And this is because in this app.component, this end-to-end test, what they do is they expect about to be the last child, right? And so if you take that out, ng2, replace it with second child, and expect search to be last, then we can run it, and it should all pass this time. And there you go. They all pass, so sweet, demo's over. Let me switch off the mirroring here. So Angular 2 has a number of built-in components. And these are similar to Angular 1, but Angular 1 had a whole lot more. There's ngIf, there's ngSwitch and switchWhen, ngStyle, ngClass. So all those are similar to Angular 1 in that you could use those to basically have dynamic behavior. But one of the things that I've seen with a lot of tutorials don't talk about is Angular 2 forms. And so forms can be complex. Here's a few reasons why. I mean, they're meant to modify data both on the client and the server. Changes are often need to be reflected elsewhere on the page. Users have a lot of leeway in what they can enter. And so you need to validate stuff, right? So Angular helps by providing controls, validators, and observers. Controls encapsulate the input and give us objects to work with. Validators give us the ability to validate input. And then observers let us watch our forms for changes and respond accordingly. So a control looks like this. This is ES6 syntax, let name control equals control, and then control value will give what's in that control. And you can also get errors, whether it's dirty or whether it's valid, all from that. So this would all go in your TypeScript code, obviously, and then to represent it in HTML, you use ngControl, and you point to that control. To do a controlled group, it's very similar. You might have multiple controls, and then with that controlled group, if you call that group.value, you'll see you get all those values, not just that one, those name value pairs. And they have a common ancestor called an abstract control, and you can check the status of the whole group rather than that just one control. And so how do you use form directives? How do you use that ngControl? You just import form directives from Angular 2 common, and it gives basically a number of directives that you can use: ngControl, control group, ngForm, and ngModel. And so for creating a component with forms, you'll import that form directives, and then you can see here you give #f to ngForm and then ngSubmit. So both of those basically come from that import. And then ngSubmit allows you to call a method with whatever you've named your form, in this case f. And so we can pass in f.value. And then if you want to bind to that ngSubmit, you just implement an onSubmit in your basically component. There's also a form builder that you can use instead of having individual controls or control group. You can use form builder that says, here's a name, here's a value, and it lets you build forms. So they're made up of forms, controls, and control groups. You can basically think of a form builder as a factory object. And then if you look at the difference, you get an ngForm model instead of an ngForm in your HTML. You still have that ngSubmit. And then you have to bind the control when you're using the form builder to your actual controls. And it looks a little different here. It's ngForm control and instead of ngControl, and you refer to the myForm and controls and then the name. And then if you want to do validation, all you have to do is pass in the validator. You can write your own, but there's validators.required, and there's a number of other ones. You just assign it to the control object, and then you can check the status. So in Angular 1, it looks similar. If you want to add an error on the div surrounding the controls, you can just find that name and then see if it's been valid or it's been touched. And similar for validation in the HTML, this is what it'll look like. So you can have a help block and say the name is invalid or the name is required. So Angular 2 has many ways to get data into your application. Obviously, you can still do HTTP with AJAX. You can do WebSockets, IndexedDB, local storage, service workers, all that. MVW is model view whatever, right? It's the default architecture for Angular 1. There's also Flux, unidirectional data flow. Stores hold your data. View renders what's in the store, and then actions change the data in the store. And so it's a bit more ceremony to set up Flex, but the idea is that because data only flows in one direction. This is a lot of what they do with React, right? They replace the whole tree when the data changes. Observables are what everyone seems to be recommending with Angular 2, and they give you streams of data. So you subscribe to the streams and then perform operations to react to changes. So RxJS is one of the most popular reactive streams library for JavaScript out there, provides powerful operations for composing operations on streams of data. So you basically have promises that emit a single value, whereas streams emit many values, and the imperative code pulls that data. So you saw when we subscribed to that data, we're subscribing to that stream. Streams are composable, so it allows you to have a pipeline of operations over your data, kind of like pipes in Unix. So there's a couple popular style guides out there for Angular and Angular 2. There's John Papa's Angular style guide, and he is working on an Angular 2 style guide. But I like Minko's, and that goes well with the seed project. And basically, he's worked on a large-scale Angular 2 application and pulled a lot of those findings out. And if you Google for Angular 2 seed or Angular style guide for 2, you come up with his before John Papa. So that seems one of the recommended ways to do it. It's got directory structures, some directives and components, how to do pipes, how to do dependency injection, how to do routing, and how to do forms. So if you're upgrading from Angular 1 to Angular 2, two basic strategies. Big bang, you can start a spike in Angular 2 and then replace the entire app once you're done. Or you can do incremental. And incremental is basically upgrading an existing app, one service or component at a time. So there's a library out there called ng-upgrade for it. And I'll post these slides later. Anything that's in yellow basically is a link that you can go and find more information about that. But this is what it looks like. You import this upgrade adapter, and then you basically pull in your old module, and then you use the Bootstrap from Angular 2 to pull that in. If you want to downgrade a component so it's Angular 2 and it works in an Angular 1 app, you can do that as well. But basically, you'll end up with both libraries in your application. And it can be an easy way to start developing with Angular 2 while you're still using Angular 1. So web workers and service workers are some cool things. With service workers, you can have a background service that handles network requests. It's ideal for offline situations and background syncs or push notifications. So if you're familiar with, I think they're calling them progressive apps now, progressive web apps, and they're starting to say not just mobile first, but offline first. Right? And so service workers is a way to do that. It can interact directly with the DOM. Communication must go through the service worker's post message method. And basically, it's a programmable network proxy. Allows you to control how network requests from your page are handled. And it allows you to achieve parallelism in JavaScript, which has really helped us a lot in Java. And a web worker is similar, but it mimics multi-threading. It basically allows intense scripts to be run in the background so they don't block other scripts. And they're ideal for UI responsiveness and going through processor-intensive functions. And it as well can't interact with the DOM. And then there's universal Angular 2. So if you actually want to write Angular apps that run on the server and do server-generated code, you can do that. So it's basically server-side template stuff. Electron will allow you to build desktop applications like Atom with Angular 2. And if you use Bootstrap, you might have used Bootstrap, Bootstrap 3, or Bootstrap 4. There's ng2 Bootstrap and Fuel UI. Those are two implementations. The ng2 Bootstrap does support Bootstrap 3, versus Fuel UI only supports Bootstrap 4. There's Angular watchers. If you've used Angular 1, this is something I've only started using in the last probably quarter. It allows you to basically install this Chrome plugin and see how many watchers you have on a page. So Angular introduced this syntax, I think it was Angular 1.3. Instead of having curly brace, two curly braces, and then a value or a variable, and allowing it to change all the time and do the two-way binding, you can do 2 colons before it, and it's only one-way binding. And so that decreases the number of watchers. For every expression you have with a variable in there, there's a watcher for it, and Angular makes sure that it gets updated. And so you might have a page that has 1,500 watchers. You might have a page that has 10,000 watchers. If you have 10,000 watchers, you might have an issue with memory. And so this plugin just installs in Chrome, and you open up a tab in the development tools, and it shows you how many watchers you have. So it's a great way to go through and decrease your number of watchers. And then we have JHipster. I love JHipster. Makes me want to put on a tie. Just talking about it. I feel hip. Don't you feel hip, Josh? I don't know why I decided I'd do this, because putting on the tie is always the hardest part. But, putting on the glasses isn't too bad. And maybe just because I forgot to do that in my last presentation, I wanted to do it here today. The best way to learn Angular 2 is this NG book 2. They really do a great job of covering everything in Angular 2. It's a very comprehensive guide. They have a bunch of apps, Reddit clone, a chat with RxJS, YouTube search as you type, and even a Spotify search. And so it's a really great way to learn how to write components, how to use forms, how to do testing. There's a whole chapter on testing, and there's over 5,000 lines of code just in there. This is a great resource if you want to show your boss that, hey, people are using Angular or Angular 2. Made with Angular is pretty much talking about Angular 1, and there's a Twitter feed for it. There's also Built with Angular 2 that'll show you that people have put these things into production using Angular 2. And this 5 Things Angular. If you start using Angular 2, I recommend that you subscribe to this on Twitter because they are posting some things every week that are like deprecated, and you might want to know with your Angular 2 app. So the question is, when will Angular 2 be released? This is a screenshot I took earlier today. They're 52% complete with the release candidate. It's the end of April. I don't know if they'll make final by Google I/O, but there's a month, so they might. So how to become an artist. You learn from others. That's part 2. You enroll in local art classes. You go to DevOps. You study the masters. You go to art school. You take a class. You make friends in the artist community. You have some beers with them. And you visit art studios. You go and check out these apps that are out there. There is a shortcut, however, to becoming an Angular artist. You just start writing code. And that's the best way to learn, is start writing your own apps that you have a need for. If you're lucky, you can get paid to do it, right? But if you can't get paid to do it, then don't be afraid to just start it on your own. So if you have any questions, there's a number of ways to contact me. I think we have a few minutes left, so I can take some questions. I'll post this up on SlideShare, and the code for this is actually on GitHub, Angular 2 tutorial, it's called, under my account for that search. And there's also another feature I implemented. And there's a few slides I posted for Angular training online, and these tutorials that I wrote, and a number of other things that they'll be in my slides and you can click on. So are there any questions? All right, well, thanks for coming.